Narcos, 2015, is adapted from the true story of a Colombian drug lord in the 1980s. While filming in Mexico, a crew member was murdered. Days later, the drug lord's brother threatened the production, demanding $1 billion for alleged copyright violations over his brother's story. The story follows the life of drug kingpin Pablo Escobar. In 1973, Chilean police raided a drug lab near the border, executing traffickers on the spot. One criminal, nicknamed Cockroach, not only avoided being shot but faked his death to escape. Cockroach, an experienced drug producer with no connections, went to Colombia's smuggling hub to find a partner. At the time, Pablo was a smuggler with extensive ties, having bribed half of Medellín's police force. His smuggling operation spanned various industries. Though occasionally stopped by new cops, Pablo's smooth talking always won them over. Cockroach took Pablo to his jungle drug lab. Despite its crude setup, the cocaine was top-notch, priced at $9 per gram. By hiding it in smuggled tires, each international trip yielded $500,000 in profit. The high returns fueled Pablo's greed. He didn't just want to dominate Colombia's market, he set his sights on Miami. His ally Gustavo recruited a smuggler nicknamed Lion to transport drugs to Miami. Miami's wealthy bought up the drugs, making Pablo's wealth grow rapidly. He built larger production bases, boosting efficiency, and hid cocaine in legal exports to Miami. Months later, to increase trafficking capacity, Pablo pioneered air-based drug transport, a historic first. He quickly became rich, earning the envy of other smugglers. They offered to collaborate, producing drugs and using Pablo's stable distribution network to split profits, forming the Medellín Cartel. But things didn't stay smooth. Cockroach, tired of hiding in the jungle, bribed police to seize Pablo's shipment. When the drugs were confiscated, Pablo confronted the police, accusing them of breaking their deal, nearly landing in jail. He paid $1 million to bribe the police chief, learned of Cockroach's betrayal, eliminated him, and disposed of the body. As cocaine eroded Miami, the U.S. government took notice. Robberies and murders surged, and drug cartels boldly attacked police. The U.S. sent anti-drug agents to Colombia. Murphy, a young investigator, arrived in Medellín with his wife, unaware this decision would change his life. In the 1980s, drug lord Pablo could run for president. At his peak, he controlled over 80% of global cocaine trade, becoming one of Forbes's 7 richest billionaires. His distribution network grew, and he expanded drug production. In Colombia's deep jungles, he built a factory the size of a small town, earning $5 billion annually. As his wealth grew, Pablo's income raised suspicions. He tried every way to launder money, but $10,000 a day became a headache. He buried cash in the jungle, hiding it in secret spots. With money he couldn't spend, Pablo turned to politics, handing out cash to the poor for support and getting interviewed by reporter Valeria. Meanwhile, the cartel's wealth attracted the M19 guerrillas, formed by students and intellectuals who robbed the rich to give to the poor. They kidnapped the Ochoa brothers' family, but they picked the wrong target. When Pablo heard, he didn't sit idly by. He gathered his associates in Medellín, proposing an organization to ensure everyone's safety. They formed an elite squad, named the Medellín Cartel by Pablo. Murphy's partner, Javier, arranged a spy to infiltrate a cartel party to gather intel, but the spy didn't return after the event. Suspecting trouble, Javier had Murphy stay back, then captured and tortured a cartel lackey. Learning the spy was discovered and held elsewhere, Javier's team arrived in time to save the spy. Murphy opposed Javier's methods but later joined his solo operations. The Medellín Cartel swiftly wiped out M19, demanding the hostages' immediate release, threatening their families next. M19, stunned by Pablo's ruthlessness, freed the Ochoa family, but Pablo didn't stop. Bloodlust drove him to ambush M19 members. M19's leader, to halt the carnage, surrendered, but Pablo spared his life. Murphy, investigating the Medellín Cartel, also protected his wife. One night, they returned home to find the door wide open, their cat killed and hung on the wall, a cartel warning. Though newly arrived and shielded by his embassy status, Murphy's info had leaked. Prompted by Javier, he recalled an airport worker who hassled him over his cat and copied his passport. Interrogating the worker revealed he sold Murphy's info to a hitman under Pablo. Simultaneously, Pablo aimed for politics, not just as a drug lord but to control the nation. Through Valeria, he bribed the media and, via her, paid $300,000 to a Liberal Party lawyer. the lawyer convinced the justice minister that Pablo was a successful businessman donating millions. The minister tacitly approved Pablo's congressional candidacy as a backup voter. Pablo held campaign events, promising to serve the people if elected. He funded schools, joined charity events, earning the nickname Robin Hood of the slums. His brazen actions caught the anti-drug agency's attention. Javier suggested letting Pablo take office, then exposing his criminal past publicly, but they lacked solid evidence. With police stations full of cartel spies, evidence and witnesses were often eliminated. Murphy cleverly found a photographer from Pablo's past arrest, securing a photo and giving it to the justice minister, hoping for action. As expected, on election result day, the Liberal Party won overwhelmingly. That night, the main candidate withdrew for health reasons, making Pablo the backup voter, a congressman. At his first national conference, the justice minister exposed Pablo's drug lord past before everyone, demanding his resignation. Pablo fought back, hiring a lawyer to sue the minister for baseless accusations. The justice minister began exposing all of Pablo's assets and banned his air trafficking routes, using every means to dismantle the Medellín Cartel's operations. But this made the minister a target in the eyes of the criminals. To ensure his safety, the government sent him to work at a foreign embassy. However, on his way to the airport, a hitman on a motorcycle assassinated him. Though Pablo ultimately withdrew from Congress, a political storm that would transform Colombia's revolution was brewing. The justice minister's murder caught the Colombian government's attention. They approved an extradition law, terrifying drug traffickers, but with the condition that Pablo be captured first. With over 800 estates in Colombia, his own intelligence network, and a private army, catching Pablo alive was nearly impossible. He was determined to drown Colombia in blood. With his vast connections, Pablo gathered his allies to devise a counter-strategy. They planned to oppose extradition supporters, hiring a team of rigorously trained mercenaries ready to wage war at any moment. Pablo's lackeys spread anti-extradition propaganda daily. The Ochoa brothers approached media companies to sway public opinion. The drug traffickers used every tactic to bribe voters in the presidential election. Those who couldn't were threatened with violence. Only one man stood firm, Galan. Celebrated by the public, Pablo wrote to Galan, expressing opposition to extradition, but Galan wouldn't listen to a drug lord. Unable to persuade the president, Pablo tried a new approach. He sent threatening letters to all judges, warning that if they didn't attend trials, the extradition law would be useless. In court, all judges were forced to wear hoods, but they still couldn't escape the traffickers' vengeance. The cartel's brazen actions didn't prompt a strong government crackdown, as the bigger issue was domestic guerrillas. Javier resorted to bribing a general, assigning Colonel Carrillo to lead the manhunt. To locate Pablo's hideout, Carrillo captured one of his lackeys. Through interrogation, Carrillo learned Pablo's exact location, but with cartel spies all over Colombia, Pablo got wind of the military's movements as soon as they left their barracks. When Murphy arrived, the hideout was empty, with only burning documents left behind. Luckily, he found a surviving address. After a raid, they captured Blackbeard, Pablo's trusted accountant, and seized crucial evidence. Murphy uncovered a lead on Barry, a drug transporter and CIA pilot. Greedy, Barry was quickly caught by Murphy. To save himself, he provided a photo of Pablo with guerrillas, making the government take Pablo's threat seriously and commit to his capture. Using the intelligence, the military destroyed Medellín Cartel factories one by one, capturing a key figure in a production facility. Extradited to the U.S., he was sentenced to life in prison. These heavy blows prompted Pablo to retaliate. He approached the M19 leader, offering $2 million to attack the Supreme Court. The leader's wife, Elisa, believed this betrayed their ideals and shouldn't risk lives for criminals. She leaked the plan and sought help from Murphy's wife, but they were too late. When Murphy reported to his superiors, M19 had already seized the Supreme Court, killing over half the judges and burning Pablo's evidence archive. Elisa became the sole witness to accuse Pablo of orchestrating the attack. Javier hid her at his place for protection. As the government mobilized to capture the M19 leader, Pablo, to eliminate loose ends, had hitmen kill the guerrillas during their payment exchange. Elisa narrowly escaped, but her unique status prevented her from testifying immediately. Elisa became the government's sole target. They interrogated a pastor working with her, learning through torture that she had ties to an American woman, likely Murphy's wife. They warned Javier to hand over Elisa or face treason charges. But during their time together, Javier and Elisa developed feelings. To protect her, he used all his connections to create a fake identity and prepared to smuggle her abroad. The Medellín Cartel's key figures fled to Panama. Their lawyers sought amnesty from the government but were denied, forcing them to keep running. Despite his vast wealth, Pablo refused to leave Colombia. Encouraged by his wife, he returned home, announcing his comeback in a dramatic way. During President Galan's speech, Pablo's hitmen assassinated him. He thought eliminating Galan would solve his problems, but at Galan's funeral, his son publicly called for Gaviria, Galan's aide, to take his place in the presidential race. The son believed Gaviria, from humble roots, would carry on his father's ideals as Colombia's new hero. If Gaviria continued supporting extradition, he'd face war with the traffickers. If he ended it, the nation would become a puppet of the cartels. Back in Colombia, Pablo approached reporters and lawyers to convince Gaviria to drop the extradition law, but Gaviria flatly refused. Colonel Carrillo intercepted intel that Pablo was preparing for war. To ensure smooth operations, he claimed his subordinates were compromised, requesting a new team from superiors. Pablo, meanwhile, wasn't idle. He bought heavy weapons and recruited jobless youths to fight for him. He offered Carrillo $6 million to stop, with elimination as the alternative. The next day, Pablo's diplomat visited Carrillo's home, offering $6 million to halt his actions. Unmoved, Carrillo kicked him out. While out with his wife, Carrillo was ambushed by hitmen but escaped thanks to quick reflexes. Javier and Murphy infiltrated the enemy, getting close to Gotcha's lackey. Learning Gotcha was heading to his hideout, they reported to superiors, requesting Gotcha's arrest. The order was approved, but only Javier could lead the raid, while Murphy stayed to protect Gaviria during an upcoming speech. In his speech, Gaviria emphasized his full support for extradition, vowing to defeat the drug cartels. This was the last thing Pablo wanted. He ordered Gotcha to buy more heavy weapons, preparing to face the military. A battle between good and evil was imminent. To oppose extradition, Pablo offered a bounty, $1 million for each slain cop. In a flash, Colombia's streets were littered with bodies, with over 200 police officers killed, their corpses filling morgues. Elisa, the last surviving M19 member, became a critical witness. Her testimony could expose Pablo's crimes, but her protector risked treason charges. Murphy decided to sneak her abroad. Before leaving, he found a CIA tracking device. Pretending to argue with his wife, he misled the trackers. When intercepted by the CIA, his car was empty. His wife had already taken Elisa to safety. Pablo continued his terrorist attacks. As Gaviria's support for extradition grew, along with his popularity, he became Pablo's assassination target. Murphy urged canceling all speeches and bolstering Gaviria's security, but with the election's final phase nearing, canceling would hurt his lead. To protect Gaviria, Murphy expanded his investigation, discovering Pablo's lackeys frequently met a mysterious man. Investigation revealed he was a Spaniard skilled at making crowd-targeting bombs, but Gaviria was already at the airport, heading to the next city. For the nation's future, he couldn't keep hiding. Luckily, Murphy arrived at the scene in time, stopping Gaviria from boarding the plane. His gut told him the flight was likely rigged with explosives. This time, Gaviria trusted Murphy. Sure enough, after takeoff, the plane exploded. Meanwhile, a lead revealed Gotcha's hideout. Javier and Carrillo staged a diversion to distract the enemy, but the paranoid Gotcha sensed danger, fleeing with his son and lackeys. When Carrillo arrived, the place was empty. Fortunately, they captured a fake congressman nearby. Under Javier's interrogation, he revealed Gotcha's new hideout. Carrillo led troops to surround it. They initially planned to capture Gotcha alive for more intel, but his heavily armed crew was larger than expected. A fierce standoff ensued. Seeing his side weaken, Gotcha fled with his son. From a helicopter, Javier spotted their car and bombarded it, trying to force a stop for a live capture, but Gotcha refused to halt. Carrillo ordered Javier to take Gotcha alive at all costs. In the second assault, Gotcha's son was shot dead. Heartbroken, Gotcha stopped the car, firing at the helicopter until his gun ran dry, left only to curse. Javier didn't capture him alive, ordering his death. This was the biggest victory since the new military unit's formation, but it spurred Pablo to launch larger revenge attacks. This was Colombia's worst air disaster. A Boeing 747 exploded mid-flight, killing all 107 passengers and crew. Pablo's plot to assassinate the president failed, making him the prime suspect in the bombing. His Robin Hood image collapsed, branding him a terrorist. The public swung to Gaviria's side, helping him become president. At his inauguration, the former president warned Gaviria to beware of drug traffickers. Newly sworn in, Gaviria cracked down hard, ordering Colonel Carrillo to expand the search and continue hunting Pablo. Despite Carrillo's multiple raids, Pablo's spies everywhere let him slip away before troops arrived. Pablo struck back with a bombing that shook the nation. He turned terrorism into war, painting a target on his back and giving the Cali cartel a chance to move in. The two cartels had long clashed over territory, but with Pablo focused on the government, he agreed to Cali's demands, trading the Los Angeles market for temporary peace. His diplomats' negotiations with Gaviria failed again, enraging Pablo, who vowed to keep targeting the president to assert dominance. Pablo ordered his men to kidnap high-ranking officials' families to force Gaviria to negotiate. Unyielding, Gaviria demanded Pablo release the hostages and surrender. Pablo began brutally killing hostages, targeting his next victim, Diana, the former president's daughter, a famous TV host with massive influence. Diana was Pablo's tool to break Gaviria. As expected, the former president confronted Pablo, urging him to accept Pablo's terms for his family's safety. For the nation's sake, Gaviria held firm, ordering troops to expand the manhunt. Pablo forced Diana to record a video urging Gaviria to negotiate, promising to free one hostage. The video reached the presidential palace. Seeing his daughter alive, the former president pressed Gaviria to agree, threatening to withhold economic and political support. Out of options, Gaviria agreed to negotiate with Pablo, stalling while allowing U.S. planes into Colombia to gather intel on Pablo. Murphy and Javier learned Pablo was on a mission with his men. Arriving too late, they found everyone linked to the plane bombing dead. Only by capturing a lackey did they locate Pablo's hideout. As Javier nabbed the lackey, a boy ran out, pointing a gun and demanding his release. Javier let the lackey go. To the poor, Pablo was a saint. Pablo and Gustavo planned their future. "You're building a prison. No. A castle. When truth is unbearable, lies become essential." Pablo bent the world to his will, deceiving it with Colombia's government's complicity. Gaviria stalled negotiations while intensifying Pablo's pursuit. Carrillo led troops into the jungle, but Pablo cunningly escaped. When they arrived, only a donkey with a phone remained. Using Diana, Pablo warned Gaviria, "Stop negotiating, and all hostages die." The former president urged Gaviria to comply, but Pablo's terms were unacceptable, not only scrapping the U.S. extradition treaty but also letting him stay in a self-built prison with his own guards. Negotiations dragged on, giving U.S. planes time to collect intel. A failed mission forced Gaviria to yield. Using intel, Carrillo located the hostage site, leading an assault to free them. He killed the last enemy, only to find Diana, hiding in a cabinet, accidentally shot dead. Diana's death devastated Colombians. Her TV persona was etched in their hearts. Guilt-ridden, Gaviria agreed to Pablo's terms to end the war. Despite Murphy and Javier's objections, the decision was final. Even Carrillo complied. When Pablo surrendered, the military would disband. Pablo planned his prison with his men, complete with a soccer field, pool, and ground floor bar. While he and Gustavo were locked up, he wanted two allies to take over drug production and trafficking, keeping business as usual. But victory came at a cost. Pablo ordered his allies to pay $200,000 monthly war fees. Though none objected openly, some plotted behind his back. Seizing his distraction, they ambushed him. Pablo realized not only police but hidden enemies were after him. This was his allies' scheme. They orchestrated the attack, and Pacho bribed the Ochoa brothers, giving police the location of the Ochoa sisters' rendezvous with Gustavo for a non-extradition, non-prosecution deal. Carrillo swiftly arrested Gustavo. Due to Pablo's government deal, they interrogated him secretly. Carrillo pressed for Pablo's hideout, but no matter the method, Gustavo wouldn't betray his brother. Carrillo's men beat Gustavo to death, staging it as an assassination. Learning of Gustavo's death, Pablo, heartbroken, ordered his body returned for burial. While investigating who killed Gustavo, Valeria revealed the truth: the Ochoa brothers colluded with the Cali cartel. Furious, Pablo ordered an attack on Cali during their soccer game, aiming to kill Pacho for revenge. But with everyone in similar uniforms, Pacho escaped when spotted. At Gustavo's funeral, the government cancelled the U.S. extradition treaty. Pablo signed a deal with Gaviria, heading by helicopter to his self-built prison. Unique in history, It looked rundown outside but was luxurious within. Weekly trucks brought women and gourmet food. This was Pablo's private prison. The inmates were Pablo's elite hitmen. Though unbound, a cage is still a cage. Pablo couldn't forget Gustavo's death. He ordered his men to keep avenging against the Cali cartel, sending allies to negotiate with Pacho. Pacho offered $3 million for a clean break, but Pablo demanded at least $12 million. Pacho used the war fees to stir tension, but Pablo's two loyal allies, with him for years, stayed true. Finally, Pacho agreed to $10 million for peace, but Pablo sensed disrespect. Enraged, he raised the price to $30 million, threatening unrest for Cali otherwise, and hiked war fees to $1 million monthly. As the war ended, Colonel Carrillo was sent abroad. Before leaving, he showed Murphy and Javier photos of the prison, not a jail, but a resort. With Medellin's criminals growing, Murphy and Javier saw Pablo's weakness. They discovered Pablo used carrier pigeons to evade military surveillance. Waiting outside the prison, they shot down pigeons, finding a letter noting the next deal at a tunnel. Back at base, they had colleagues map the prison's layout, but found no tunnel. Puzzled, a comment from Murphy's wife sparked an idea. "All I saw was a truck. The tunnel was likely the truck." The next day, they stopped a delivery truck, planted a camera, and Murphy coerced the driver into becoming a spy, photographing each delivery. From then on, Pablo's prison secrets were exposed. The anti-drug agency gave the photos to President Gaviria, who worried about leaks. Between women and explosives, Gaviria hoped Pablo stayed locked up forever. But long imprisonment made Pablo paranoid. A farmer dug up a $3 million cash stash in a field, while allies reported a $3 million drug loss. Fueled by lackey's flattery, Pablo suspected his two allies betrayed him over high war fees. In truth, Pablo had buried the money, and the land was Gustavo's. When the allies left, Pablo killed them, beating them to death and burning their bodies. Their disappearance spread across the city. With rumors Pablo eliminated them, Pacho seized the chance, having his men tip off the anti-drug agency. At first, Murphy and Javier doubted the claim. Reviewing the driver's photos, they confirmed the allies entered the prison but never left. To take down Pablo, Murphy leaked the photos to the media, exposing Pablo's lavish prison life. Police announced an investigation into the two criminals' deaths. Colleagues praised Murphy and Javier. But the move wasn't approved by superiors. As punishment, the embassy suspended Murphy and Javier. Facing public pressure, the president held an emergency meeting, deciding to convince Pablo to relocate. If he entered a state prison, it would end. Colombian troops swiftly surrounded the prison. Sensing danger, Pablo ordered his men to arm for battle, ready to fire if invaded. Knowing shooting was unwise, Pablo hoped for government negotiators. That night, the defense minister arrived, representing the president, asking Pablo to move to another prison, claiming repairs for this one. Pablo saw through the lie, accusing them of breaking the deal. To speak directly with the president, he took the minister hostage. On the call, Pablo leaked his captivity, then faked a dropped call and hung up. The situation spiraled out of control. The president ordered special forces to attack. As the order came, Pablo got word criminals were no match for special forces. Troops stormed the prison, neutralized enemies, and rescued the defense minister, but Pablo was gone. Special forces found a tunnel in a room. Pablo had escaped again. Pablo broke out in under an hour. Rumors of war reigniting in Colombia spread. But this time, no surrender, no talks, no deals. This time, we'll kill him. Pablo's terror forced Colombia's government to deploy thousands of troops, 250 special forces, 7 police dogs, and 4 helicopters. Everyone thought Pablo couldn't escape, but events defied expectations. After fleeing, Pablo faced troops. "Sorry, we have orders to stop you. We must arrest you." "Kid, I'm sorry." "Sorry, but that's not happening." He slipped the net, hiding with family in one of his hundreds of estates. The next morning, news of his escape hit the airwaves. The president ordered troops to lock down Medellín, searching house by house, certain Pablo was in a residential area. Not only the government hunted Pablo, the Medellín Cartel faced internal strife. Judy, whose husband Pablo killed in prison, sought his hideout to avenge him. Other members stayed indifferent, but Pablo was no ordinary man. He hired a trusted driver to ferry him for business, solidifying his power. Hiding in a taxi's trunk, Pablo evaded the military. At Medellín's accounting hub, he learned Judy was spreading rumors, urging members not to pay fees. Pablo relocated them, then sent men to Judy's production site. Though she wasn't there, he killed her brother. Losing her husband and brother drove Judy to seek stronger allies against Pablo. Meanwhile, Murphy and Javier got intel that Pablo's lackey would appear near a brothel. Capturing him could lead to Pablo. At the brothel, the driver spotted Javier, fled inside, rallied allies, and escaped through a market, eluding Javier. That night, Pablo summoned lawyer Fernando to negotiate with the government. If the president guaranteed his safety, he'd return to his prison, but he miscalculated. The president refused further talks, vowing to crush Pablo by any means. "I'm clear, we won't negotiate with Pablo Escobar anymore." No one expected drug lord Pablo to nearly die over a toilet. Colombia's president's TV speech made Pablo think his foes were weakening. He agreed to an interview, offering terms. He'd accept any prison if his safety was assured. But he was wrong. The president not only rejected talks but accepted armed support from the U.S. president. The U.S. sent a Navy heavyweight, Ambassador Arthur Crosby, to lead the mission against the drug lord. Top CIA agent Owen was dispatched to find leads. A new superior oversaw Murphy and Javier, ensuring they didn't tarnish the nation's image. Pablo sent Fernando to negotiate with the president, but was repeatedly rebuffed. One day, Colombia's chief inspector called Fernando. For national peace, he agreed to talk with Pablo. Colombian law barred the president from interfering with the chief inspector, so he sent subordinates to stop this absurd act. But the inspector insisted on negotiating, cornering the president. He raised the bounty for Pablo's capture, desperate to nab him quickly. They received a flood of tips, many false, spread by Pablo's men to mislead. When Murphy and Javier checked reported locations, Pablo was nowhere to be found. But some intel was reliable. Spies spotted Pablo's lackey buying an expensive toilet, identical to the one in his prison. Javier ordered surveillance on the delivery site. Technicians confirmed Pablo was hiding in an estate. Their resources weren't enough for a raid, so they informed the president, hoping for military support. The operation was meant to be covert, quietly surrounding the estate. But General Jaramillo, overconfident, stormed in. News reached Pablo. Woken from sleep by his men, he fled with his family that night. When Jaramillo's troops arrived, Pablo had escaped through a pre-dug tunnel, fleeing in the dead of night. The incident enraged him. Previously, he held back for negotiations, but now, out of patience, he declared war on the government. "Yes, boss." Pablo's retaliation devastated the government. In one day, over 50 police were killed, forcing General Jaramillo to resign. The deaths of innocent officers left the president guilt-ridden. To counter Pablo, he recalled Colonel Carrillo from abroad. Though Carrillo's methods were extreme, he terrified Pablo. Back with the task force, Carrillo made a show of defiance, leading hundreds of troops to Pablo's stronghold and urinating on his mural in public to announce his return. Outwardly taunting Pablo, Carrillo targeted his spies. While moving out, he intercepted radio calls, pinpointed a location, and acted. Carrillo's team swept through, quickly capturing kids working for Pablo. To teach a lesson, he shot one dead. This is what happens when you work for Pablo Escobar. He gave a bullet to the youngest, ordering it delivered to Pablo as a gift, then released them. The next day, Pablo received Carrillo's gift. Learning of his actions, Pablo contacted Valeria to expose Carrillo. Judy met the real head of the Cali cartel, Gilberto, a top figure in the world's second-largest drug cartel. Gilberto was unassuming, appearing as a bank director. With his brother Miguel, they ran a business empire, merely a front. Like Medellín, they profited from cocaine but stayed in the shadows, controlling things discreetly to maximize profits safely. Unlike Pablo, they shunned the spotlight and adoration. To appease him, they seeded Miami, operating in quieter markets like New York, classic low-profile players. Cali and Judy shared a goal: destroy Pablo. Judy sought revenge for her husband. Gilberto wanted a bigger market, but Cali avoided direct confrontation to stay hidden. Miguel planned to use Carrillo to eliminate Pablo. They had a lackey leak a drug production site to Javier. Carrillo led a swift raid, subduing guards and seizing the facility. The biggest win was capturing Pablo's key lieutenant. Interrogation yielded Pablo's intel. Carrillo took him aboard a helicopter, threatening prison but aiming to recruit him. To break him, Carrillo pushed one man out, but the lieutenant, unafraid, refused to betray Pablo. Drug lord Pablo was haunted by nightmares of his wife dying under Carrillo's gun. To protect his family, he had to eliminate Carrillo. Carrillo's killing of a child hit the news, but, defying Pablo's hopes, Colombia and the U.S. denied it. Pablo wrote to an influential reporter, aiming to expose Carrillo and bring him to a military tribunal, but Carrillo pressed on, destroying Pablo's drug labs, believing that killing his men would make him easier to catch. Intel revealed a suspicious site. Carrillo's raid killed key Medellín figures, spreading fear in the cartel. Pablo felt unprecedented pressure. CIA agent Owen approached the Castaño brothers, a core unit fighting guerrillas. Their father was kidnapped and killed by guerrillas, fueling their vengeance against anyone tied to them. Since Pablo worked with M19, Owen persuaded them to target him and suggested an alliance with Cali. But cautious Cali declined, avoiding open conflict with Pablo. As Pablo's driver, Limón, lived in fear of a gruesome death, he turned to his girlfriend Maritza, asking her to tip off the task force to catch Pablo. Through a friend, Maritza met Javier, offering Pablo's whereabouts. Javier relayed this to Carrillo, and they trusted Maritza once. The next day, Maritza's tip came. Wiretaps confirmed Pablo's voice in the area. Carrillo led a raid but fell into Pablo's trap. At the target, a nearby car exploded. The narrow alley split the team, with trucks blocking both ends. Criminals fired from rooftops. Without cover, the task force faltered. Carrillo, shot and dying, lay on the ground. Pablo approached, using Carrillo's gifted bullet to kill him. Pablo gave Maritza a bag of cash as thanks, revealing she'd been used. Carrillo's death blindsided the government. Cali allied with the Castaños against Pablo. The deputy minister took the fall to save the president's face. Javier, racked with guilt despite colleagues' reassurances, drowned his sorrows in alcohol. One day, his informant found him in a bar, leading him to a heavily guarded estate where he met Judy and the Castaños. With Carrillo gone, Pablo resumed his free life. Protected by his hitmen, he lived above the law. Medellín's drug trade boomed, especially Lion's Market, where demand outstripped supply. Lion used smuggling networks to move drugs. Shipping cocaine to Miami was easy. Laundering and returning money to Colombia was the challenge. Facing the government, Pablo needed funds, ordering Lion back to meet him. After Carrillo's death, the colonel's position went unfilled. No one dared take it under Pablo's threat. Intelligence piled up, untouched. But the president had a choice: Colonel Hugo Martinez. At Martinez's inauguration ceremony, the president urged him to replace Carrillo. Martinez refused repeatedly until learning his son joined the task force. To protect him, Martinez reluctantly accepted. Meanwhile, Judy and the Castaño brothers tried convincing Javier to share CIA intel to help Cali defeat Pablo. Javier brushed them off, refusing. Before leaving, Judy gave him Maritza's address. Javier captured Maritza for questioning, but she explained her boyfriend used her. Trusting her again, Javier asked her to lure Limón out. Tracking Limón, Javier found Pablo's production site and requested task force backup, but was told to wait for approval. As he prepared to leave, Javier spotted Pablo's key lieutenant. Seizing the rare chance, he called Judy. The Castaños arrived, their combat skills rivaling Colombia's army. They swiftly killed the enemies inside. The lieutenant fled, but Judy's men blocked his escape. Captured, he endured torture, revealing key info about Pablo, including Lion's meeting with him tomorrow. The next day, Cali intercepted Lion at the airport, planning to use him to seize Miami's market. They had Lion tell Pablo his men didn't pick him up, so he returned to Miami out of concern. In the following days, Javier fed intel to Cali, crippling Pablo's operations. Lieutenants killed, money stolen, production sites destroyed. Cali's attacks, though dishonorable, were effective. They formed Los Pepis, a new resistance group. After Los Pepis formed, Medellín suffered heavy losses. Pablo's spies found nothing. Suspecting Cali but lacking proof, he avoided starting a war. Colombia's government ignored Los Pepis, believing their collapse would follow Pablo's capture. The top priority was catching Pablo. The task force learned his lieutenant's pregnant girlfriend might draw him out. Murphy urged Martinez to act, sealing off the area and searching homes. But this was bad news for Javier, who'd tipped off the Castaños. As they cancelled their plan, they clashed with the task force at a checkpoint. The Castaños tried bribing the soldiers, who aimed to arrest them. Javier arrived just in time to prevent a conflict. With Javier's help, the Castaños passed the checkpoint. Murphy learned Javier leaked intel to them, sparking a heated argument. Pablo's men were everywhere, including a doctor who found an injured Los Pepis member. Under questioning, he revealed the Castaños and Cali-backed Los Pepis. Pablo retaliated, bombing the wedding of Gilberto's daughter. Cali's 3 bosses escaped with minor injuries. Furious, Gilberto ordered a counterattack. During the Christian holiday, Pablo's mother, ignoring his and his wife's objections, took the driver to church. Los Pepis spies followed her back to the estate and attacked. In the chaos, Pablo's wife fled with the kids. Pablo and his men retreated to a new hideout. Once safe, Pablo sent his family abroad temporarily, promising to reunite later. Unbeknownst, it was their last meeting. To force the government against Los Pepis, Pablo bombed Cali's production sites and threatened more explosions if Los Pepis wasn't stopped, but Los Pepis intensified attacks, slaughtering Pablo's men and posing their bodies strangely. Javier condemned their brutality, but Los Pepis called it effective, aiming to terrify Pablo's followers. They targeted Fernando, ambushed on his way home. He narrowly escaped, rushing to pick up his son to flee. Javier found Fernando at a motel, urging him to share Pablo's intel. Judy's men learned of this. Owen pressed Javier to keep cooperating, but he refused. Returning to the motel, Javier found Fernando and his son brutally killed. To protect his family, Pablo booked 8 different flights. The government got wind of it. Murphy was ordered to track Pablo's family at the airport. He discovered their final flight was to Germany and followed. In Germany, Murphy reported them for carrying large cash sums, preventing their entry. Furious, Pablo called the airport and German embassy, threatening to bomb the airport if his family wasn't allowed in. After talks between Colombia's president and Germany, they banned Pablo's family and sent them back to Colombia. Upon return, they were placed under house arrest by inspectors and moved to a safe location by police. Learning his family was back, Pablo, enraged, planned revenge against the president. He ordered a massive bombing, killing and injuring many, including innocent children. Pablo became public enemy number 1. His former supporters turned against him. Seeing their chance, Cali acted. Gilberto sent Pacho to Miami. Lion, Pablo's key transporter, was bribed, handing over routes and methods. Once Cali controlled Miami's market, Lion, no longer useful, was brutally killed by Pacho. To crush Medellín, Los Pepis had Judy negotiate with a notorious criminal gang, convincing them to ditch Pablo for Cali. Seeing Pablo's downfall, they agreed, arranging to meet the Castaños at a casino on Friday. A gang member leaked this to Pablo. He rallied his men to ambush Los Pepis. Needing funds to hire more men, Pablo sent his accountant and lackeys to retrieve hidden cash. With his family under house arrest, Pablo grew anxious. He contacted Valeria, using an interview as a pretext to deliver a radio and cash to his wife. Though Valeria met Tata and delivered the items, she was killed by Los Pepis the next day. Meanwhile, police captured Pablo's lackey, Blackie, seizing his radio. Javier used the bombing to pressure him, and Blackie gave up Mickey's contact number, which could pinpoint a location. After planning, the task force moved in. Javier repeatedly called Mickey. The unfamiliar voice raised Mickey's suspicions. At the final cash pickup, Mickey betrayed Pablo, killed his accomplice, and planned to flee with the money. But the task force closed in. Captured, Mickey agreed to provide intel to save himself, revealing Pablo's plans against Cali. That night, with Mickey still missing, Pablo sensed the worst. While rallying his men, Mickey called, pressing for Pablo's arrival time. Realizing Mickey's betrayal, Pablo hung up, ordering Limon to change routes. Out of options, he fled to his father's farm, isolated amid green mountains and white clouds. For a time, Pablo lost all contact. A month later, the president condemned Los Pepis' extremism. They promised to disband. Tata contacted Pablo daily via radio, but police intercepted it. An officer stole the radio password and gave it to Javier, who met Martinez to strategize. At his father's farm, Pablo felt at peace, dreaming of bringing his family there to retire. But his father, aware of Pablo's crimes, refused. Ashamed, this pushed Pablo to return to Medellín. Drug lord Pablo craved power's peak. Had he become a congressman or run for president, Colombia might have burned. But on his 44th birthday, he hid in a Medellín house, hearing family birthday wishes over the phone, unaware the task force was eavesdropping, pinpointing his exact location. To avoid alerting him, Martinez set up an ambush nearby. The next day, the government announced Pablo's family's house arrest would lift in a week, leaving them vulnerable to Los Pepis. Tata told Pablo, urging him to surrender for their children's safety. Surrender meant total defeat, but Pablo promised to consider it. Their conversation confirmed Pablo's location. The task force moved, evacuating the neighborhood to clear obstacles. After preparations, they searched every house but found no Pablo. The wiretap team realized a nearby lake distorted the signal. Ignoring the risk, Pablo drove out. At a diner, he met a cop, bearded and disheveled. Pablo went unrecognized, even chatting openly, wearing sunglasses, eating ice cream, strolling the streets. He felt rare happiness. In that moment, he saw his late cousin Gustavo beside him. Pablo shared his struggles. Medellin's glory was crumbling, and Tata urged surrender. "Tata wants me to give up." "Tata's wise, Pablo. Surrender, go to prison, live out your days. Rebuild your empire, break out. Things aren't as easy as before, little brother. Since you left, everything's fallen apart." Back home, Pablo contacted Tata, agreeing to an interview with foreign reporters to pressure the government. He demanded his family's safe exit abroad, then planned to join guerrillas in the jungle and fight to the end. The intelligence team overheard everything. After days of searching, they spotted Pablo at a window. Confirming his identity, they called for backup. Soldiers surrounded the house, preparing to storm in. A barking dog alerted Pablo. Limon ran out and was killed by a sniper. Pablo fired back, fleeing, but was gunned down steps later, incapacitated. Soldiers finished him off. The drug lord's reign ended. Pablo's death sparked celebrations across Colombia. Cali gained the most. Pablo's era ended. A new king rose. No one challenged Cali, but they overlooked one thing. Pablo's death marked the start of their nightmare, as the U.S. government targeted them. This is the highly anticipated Season 3, set in familiar Colombia. Pablo, the star of the first 2 seasons, is replaced by the Cali cartel. After his death, Cali became the world's most notorious drug cartel. Pablo's former spotlight now shone on them. They built an invincible business empire, smuggling cocaine to Mexico, Europe, and even Eastern countries, with few tracing it to Cali, not even their hired hands. Cali is led by 4 bosses, dubbed the Gentlemen of Cali. Pacho handles distribution and security, familiar to fans of Mexican narco shows. Chepe runs U.S. operations, based in New York year-round. Miguel, second in command, manages finances and bribes high officials. Gilberto, the eldest, is the brains, approving all major decisions. Today was momentous. For the first time in years, the 4 bosses reunited, as Gilberto had a major announcement. Key cartel members and business partners attended. Gilberto revealed they were negotiating with Colombia's government to surrender in 6 months, handing over all drug crime data for lighter sentences and retaining some wealth. Some cheered Gilberto's speech, others clapped reluctantly, and a few were openly dissatisfied. Though 6 months remained to profit, they didn't want to become legitimate businessmen. But Gilberto's word was final, no one dared object. After leaving, they gossiped. Some bad-mouthed Gilberto over the phone, others complained in cars. Unbeknownst, their words reached the 4 bosses. Cali spent billions yearly on intelligence, especially in their city. All entrants and key figures were under their control. Dissidents vanished mysteriously, leaving no trace. Claudio's death was somewhat unjust. A Salazar family member and Cali partner, he returned to his hotel after Gilberto's speech, venting to his wife, "Don't bother me, I'm exhausted. All night listening to that brain-dead idiot," forced to clap. Gilberto considered letting it slide as private talk, but Miguel disagreed. Better kill the wrong guy than miss the right one. Pacho and Claudio had bad blood, so Pacho was tasked with making Claudio disappear. A recurring figure across 3 seasons, Pacho became a fan favorite, his dance with his boyfriend stealing hearts. But his ruthless work style captivated even more. As one of Cali's gentlemen, Pacho urged Gilberto to eliminate Claudio over past conflicts. Since Claudio was an invited guest, Gilberto refused immediate revenge. Loyal to Gilberto, Pacho shelved the plan, but things took a turn. While the 4 bosses eavesdropped, they caught Claudio arguing with his wife at the hotel, viciously insulting Gilberto. Though Gilberto brushed it off, his brother Miguel wanted Claudio to pay dearly. At the party, introverted Miguel sat alone until he spotted a prize, Maria, Claudio's wife. He approached her but fumbled, creating awkward silence. Luckily, Gilberto's speech broke the tension. Post-speech, Miguel saw Maria and Claudio arguing, revealing their shaky marriage. Claudio, Miguel thought, didn't deserve her. When Claudio insulted Gilberto, Miguel seized the chance, defying Gilberto's leniency and ordering Pacho to retaliate. Learning Claudio went to a bar for fun after the fight, Pacho took his men there. At the counter, he grabbed a bottle and approached Claudio. "Hey, Claudio. This bottle's on me. Let's call our past even." Claudio, knowing he was on Cali's turf, agreed. They shook hands. Pacho and his boyfriend danced, lost in the music. When it ended, Pacho faced Claudio again. He tied Claudio's feet to a motorcycle, hopped on another, and, relishing his screams, floored the gas, dragging Claudio's arm as he sped off. Pacho savored the revenge, while Miguel planned his next move. As Maria searched for her husband, Miguel's men summoned her, revealing, "Your husband's dead. One of my guys killed him." Heartbroken, Maria accepted a drink from Miguel and became his ally. A man entered a hotel, scanned the area, and drilled a hole in the wall. Soon, a surveillance device was set, aimed at the bed. This was Jorge, Cali's deputy security chief. He planned to quit and start a business with his wife, but Miguel refused, demanding he work until the cartel's surrender. At a critical time, Miguel needed loyal aides like Jorge. Unable to refuse, Jorge agreed to 6 more months, sparking an argument with his wife. One of Cali's drug smuggling methods used gas tanks to ship to the U.S. The gas, released through water pipes, evaporated into homes, killing 4 and poisoning thousands. The government mistook it for a gas leak, unaware of Cali's scheme. Gilberto, watching the news, was furious, likening it to Pablo's brutality. He berated his nephew David, who handled the operation, fearing it would derail their retirement plan. The investigator, incorruptible, resisted security chief Franklin's bribes. Gilberto turned to Jorge for a solution. "The only sure thing is this guy has no weaknesses. No snowflake is pure." All intelligence focused on the investigator. Billions spent on intel paid off. Jorge found a lead. The investigator's wife was calling her lover, arranging to meet tomorrow at the usual spot. Jorge easily traced it, installing a camera in the hotel room. They obtained proof of her affair. Gilberto praised Jorge's efficiency. But that afternoon, the investigator was set to announce findings at a press conference. "Someone needs to talk to him." David suggested Jorge handle it. Gilberto agreed. Jorge confronted the investigator, who'd uncovered the truth. Jorge used the affair photos to blackmail him into calling it an accident. Knowing of his wife's infidelity, the investigator insisted on the truth. Jorge warned that leaking the photos and videos would devastate his son. That night, on TV, the investigator announced a false report as Jorge demanded. Gilberto sighed in relief. Heading to a soccer match, his men reported a moment of silence for the victims. "Tell the crowd we'll donate half the ticket sales to them." Jorge watched the news, feeling uneasy. This fueled his thoughts of betrayal. For drug cartels, making money is easy, sustaining it lifelong is hard. With 6 months until Cali's dissolution, it was their last chance to profit. Gilberto sent Pacho to Mexico for the cartel's biggest deal ever. Pacho met Amado, carrying $300 million. "Can you pull off a deal this big? I care about 2 things, how much and how long." Pacho said they'd work together for 6 more months. Amado, not wanting to lose a key partner, urged Pacho to go solo with him afterward. Pacho didn't commit, only insisting Amado ensure the final deal. Amado agreed. Gilberto's surrender plan seemed on track, but the US DEA wouldn't let Cali off easily. After toppling Pablo, Javier, now a DEA specialist in Colombia, found Cali's weakness: meticulous money laundering to avoid trouble. A bank computer glitch exposed Cali's laundering trail. Javier targeted Humberto, their money launderer, and sent Chris and Daniel to Cali. Police Chief Calderon greeted the agents. When Chris said they were chasing leads, Calderon sensed their distrust. In the squad car, Calderon cursed Cali for ruining the city, earning some trust from Chris. At a building, they found the top 6 floors belonged to Cali. Calderon suggested his men monitor it while the agents got a warrant in Bogotá, but Chris produced a warrant, demanding an immediate search. Furious, Calderon had planned to stall the foreigners, but they were prepared. Calderon called his men. Cali's spies caught wind of the raid. Jorge, ready, had men tail the agents. Learning of the police move, he warned Palomari, the chief accountant, to take critical evidence and leave. Busy with Gilberto's tasks, Palomari ignored him. Jorge raced back, but the agents and Calderón were already inside. Jorge took the stairs to Palomari's office, finding cash and evidence on the desk. Furious, Jorge tried to act, but Palomari, oblivious to the gravity, blocked him. As police entered, Palomari froze. Jorge rushed in, seeing Palomari stalling outside. He closed the blinds, hid documents on a shelf, tossed cash in the trash, and hid, silent. Daniel eyed the office. Palomari tried to stop him, but Daniel pushed in. Jorge spotted cash on the floor, kicking it away as Daniel reached the door. Daniel scanned the room, Palomari shielding Jorge. Javier searched but found nothing, leaving with Chris and local police, sealing and taking external documents. Escaping danger, Jorge met Security Chief Franklin, recounting the day. Knowing Jorge had a date with his wife, Franklin let him go home early, handling the rest. Chris and Daniel got documents, all legal, planning to have Calderón drive them to Bogotá. They were refused. Calderón demanded they leave Cali that night, revealing he'd been bought by Cali. Calderón called Jorge, explaining he didn't expect the search warrant. He claimed the agents flew out and he seized the documents. Relieved, Jorge relaxed. Franklin went to Palomari for the documents, but Palomari, knowing their importance, insisted on delivering them himself. Franklin drove him. "Open the door, Franklin. Open it yourself, Palomari. Take the passenger seat." Arguing over seats, they missed Chris and Daniel tailing them. The agents hadn't left. At the airport, Daniel recalled Palomari's morning curse, sounding like a Chilean, saying, if Palomari was Chilean, he could be extradited to the U.S. They followed Palomari's car to a villa, watching it enter. Parking with lights off, they staked out. Nearly dozing, they saw the car exit. Spotting the man in the back, Chris muttered, "That bastard Gilberto." Nicknamed the chessmaster, Gilberto planned meticulously. He scheduled his wives, Monday Tuesday with wife 3, Wednesday Thursday with wife 2, Friday Saturday with wife 1, weekends for soccer, open to any wife. He ran Cali tightly, bribing officials for protection, determined not to die like Pablo, but today was his last day of freedom. DEA agents Chris and Daniel stumbled on Gilberto's home, reporting to Javier. At dawn, Javier led a team, ordering Cali police to assist, confiscating all communication devices. Even Calderón didn't know the target. The convoy reached a villa. After planning, police raided, disabling the gate. Soldiers stormed in but found no one. Talking with Calderón, Javier decided to tear the place apart. A Cali guard watching outside reported to Jorge. Knowing the villa wasn't Cali's, Jorge told him to leave. Miguel called, sending Jorge on an errand, leaving Franklin in charge. The task force turned the villa upside down, finding nothing. "Search again," Javier whispered to Daniel. "Now." The raid was a diversion. Last night, Javier met Colonel Martinez. While Javier faked the search, Martinez hid with troops in a chicken truck, heading to Gilberto's real home. The true raid began. The truck stopped at the gate, feigning a breakdown. The guard, sent to shoo them, was knocked out. Soldiers rushed the villa. It was Sunday. Gilberto's 3 wives were home. Wife 2 answered the doorbell, facing armed troops. Hearing the noise, Gilberto tucked a gun in his waistband. Everyone inside was subdued. Javier, informed, told Calderón to disband the team and drive them to the airport. En route, Javier mentioned meeting an old friend, so Calderón drove to Gilberto's villa. As Calderón exited, Martinez's men restrained him. Martinez assigned a guard to watch Calderón, then cast the net. Cali hadn't heard a peep. Calderón was detained. Jorge was on Miguel's errand, and Miguel was with his mistress, unaware of Gilberto's plight. "Drop the weapon. Don't shoot, I surrender." Bound in the living room, Gilberto, once impeccably dressed, saw his disheveled reflection, hoping the nightmare would end. Calderón sensed trouble, slipped away when unwatched, and called Cali from a payphone. Miguel learned of Gilberto's arrest, throwing Cali into chaos. Cali's men and loyal police mobilized to rescue Gilberto before he left the city. The task force knew capturing was easier than transporting. They put Gilberto in the chicken truck, racing to Bogota's airport. Police spotted the truck, chasing fiercely and stopping it, but found it empty. Javier had used an identical truck as a decoy. Gilberto's truck reached the airport safely. The police tried to ground the plane. Martinez persuaded them to let the DEA go. An hour later, the plane landed in Bogotá. Gilberto, calm, believed his brothers would free him. Cali members gathered at the house Miguel gave his mistress Maria. On edge, Jorge arrived, having been sent to North Valley for Maria's son. Miguel pressured the government, demanding the leak's source. Franklin tried explaining, but Jorge, deputy security chief, took blame for monitoring the DIA. Miguel, knowing he'd sent Jorge, ordered them to pinpoint the issue and secure other members. Bogota's politicians held an emergency meeting, arguing Gilberto's arrest broke the surrender deal, risking war with Cali, and urged his release. The president insisted on judicial process, detaining Gilberto pre-trial. Exhausted, Javier returned to the office. Martinez visited, and Javier poured a drink. "Let's celebrate tonight. Work continues tomorrow." Martinez replied, "No go." Martinez had resigned. Among Cali's documents, the DEA found a bribery list with his name. Javier, regretful, saw money's power. In 1995, drug lord Gilberto was caught. The boss's imprisonment set Cali on edge. Miguel ordered the security chiefs to find the cause. "I want answers today." Jorge and Franklin checked the surveillance hub but found no internal suspects. At the airport, they learned the DEA agents didn't fly to Bogotá. Calderón had sworn he saw them leave. Franklin accused Calderón of lying, but Jorge thought it was an oversight. They confronted Calderón. Franklin pressed about the agents, but Calderón said he'd investigated. The DEA traced Gilberto's home via Cali member, Palomari, driven by Franklin. If Miguel knew, Franklin would face consequences. Panicked, he told Jorge to blame Calderón if Miguel asked for a name, knowing Miguel wouldn't kill a cop. Franklin reported to Miguel, consulting Jorge. Jorge confirmed Calderón's fault. "We can't pay that useless fool. But it doesn't explain how they found my brother. Maybe the DEA used advanced wiretaps." Miguel accepted the explanation for now. After the report, Franklin thanked Jorge for covering for him. But Jorge worried if Miguel questioned Calderón, the truth would surface. He couldn't abandon Franklin, his former boss who got him this job after his company went bankrupt. Back home, Jorge went to his daughter's school gate. Flaco called, saying the DEA agents were still in Cali, staking out a building. Jorge realized they lacked solid intel and told Flaco to track their location. Overwhelmed by work, Jorge felt drained, but seeing his wife and daughter eased his mind. Before he could speak to his wife, David called, summoning him to a high-level meeting. Jorge found it odd, having just reported. He tried calling Franklin, but no one answered. He went to the meeting alone. Following David into a room, Jorge sensed something off, not a meeting setup. In the first room, Franklin's wife appeared. With a bad feeling, Jorge followed David further, seeing Calderón restrained by two men, struggling. "You bastard. What did you tell them? Gilberto's arrest wasn't my fault." Jorge watched Calderón drowned, convulsing until still, terrified. He knew his actions caused this, but hadn't expected such brutality. David led Jorge to another room, where a hooded figure sat. Jorge removed the hood. Franklin, trying to stay calm. "What's going on?" David said that afternoon, while Jorge was with his family, Franklin tried fleeing with his to the airport. Jorge hadn't known David was tailing him. "Thank me, you bastard. I'm why you're standing here, not next to him." Jorge pleaded for Franklin's life, but David ignored him. "He's a good man. You're the mole, Jorge." Franklin interrupted, begging Jorge to save his wife. Jorge rushed to the first room, finding her in a pool of blood. Stunned, Jorge had thought Cali's bosses were merciful, unlike other drug criminals. Now he saw their cruelty. Miguel arrived, believing Franklin was the mole, and Calderón's failure to spot the agent's departure led to Gilberto's arrest. Jorge became the new security chief. Realizing he and his family would never be safe in Cali, he made a bold choice. At home, with his wife and daughter eating, Jorge acted normal, retreating to the bathroom to compose himself. He drove to a payphone with anti-wiretapping gear and called the DIA. "Cali knows where you are." Chris and Daniel, on guard, checked from a window but saw nothing. "I want to cooperate." The next morning, they met Jorge in the suburbs. Confirming he was unarmed, they got in a car. Chris started introductions, but Jorge knew their names, revealing he was Cali's security chief with critical intel. He offered to testify against Gilberto for immunity in the U.S. The agents demanded he help catch Miguel. Jorge explained that since Gilberto's arrest, David, Miguel's son, handled his protection, so he didn't know Miguel's location. Chris asked why Jorge was cooperating. He said he despised the Narcos' brutal tactics and wanted to protect his family. They insisted he help nab Miguel. Jorge asked for time to consider. Jorge assigned tasks to his men, then asked David to join Miguel's protection detail, but was refused. That day was Cali's festival, a week-long celebration. Gilberto usually led the opening, but with him in prison, David urged Miguel to step up. Reluctant due to crowds and safety, Miguel agreed, needing to show leadership. He invited Maria to join. David called Jorge to the opening's bar, assigning security duties. Knowing Miguel would appear, Jorge tipped off Chris, telling the DEA to prepare a raid. At home, Jorge told his wife and kids to pack, preparing to flee that night, withholding the reason. That evening, Miguel and Maria attended the festival. Jorge escorted them to the VIP area on the second floor, spotting Chris, Daniel, and armed men below. As the ceremony began with Miguel's speech amid cheers, Jorge signaled Chris, meeting in the bathroom. Fearing civilian casualties, Jorge warned, "Tell your men to wait until he's outside." Chris admitted he brought no team, only verifying Jorge's reliability. Jorge realized the armed men might be rival assassins. He urged Miguel to leave. Killers below sensed trouble and opened fire, plunging the hall into chaos. With henchmen's cover, Jorge and David got Miguel out. Back at his hideout, Miguel recalled David's distraction, crediting Jorge's alertness for saving him. He assigned Jorge to his protection. Outwardly hesitant, Jorge was elated, now able to track Miguel. He met Chris, berating them for doubting him, earning their trust, and gave them Miguel's address. The attackers were North Valley. Previously, they avoided clashing with mighty Cali. When Gilberto announced the surrender, North Valley's Orlando feigned compliance but plotted. With Gilberto jailed, they saw a chance, targeting Miguel and Pacho. Miguel confirmed North Valley's role, vowing war. Gilberto, from prison, opposed it, fearing it would ruin the surrender plan. Miguel ignored Gilberto, now leading Cali. Pacho returned from Mexico, Chepe from New York due to the attack. The three met. Miguel declared, "They want to steal our work. There's one way, war." Chepe asked, "Gilberto's call. Mine." During the church prayer, gunfire erupted outside. Armed attackers appeared, Cali guards down. A sports car blared music. The leader ordered a barrage. When the music stopped, a henchman recognized the car as the one used in Pacho's assassination attempt. Pacho strutted into the church, took the stage, and told the crowd to relay to Orlando. Cali declared war, challenging North Valley, comprising 4 families, including Salazar, whose son Claudio was butchered by Pacho. North Valley controlled the largest drug port. More ruthless than Cali, they sought people alive routinely. After the 3 Cali bosses deliberated, they decided to seize North Valley's port. While Miguel prepared for war, Jorge met the DEA again, asking why they hadn't acted despite knowing Miguel's address. They explained needing U.S. and Colombian government approval. The plan was set. Tomorrow morning, 3 trucks from different directions would hit the target building, with a helicopter landing on the roof. Jorge saw flaws. Cali's security was airtight, with 24/7 guards on every route. Trucks approaching directly would alert Miguel. Calling the plan too obvious, Jorge vowed to handle it himself, ensuring the DEA's silent entry. They knew success was critical, or Jorge would be exposed. That night, Jorge went to the road the DEA would pass, where his henchman Flaco was on duty. Jorge sent Flaco home, taking his shift. Miguel called, summoning Jorge upstairs. "Wait till you're back." "Fine." Meeting Miguel, Jorge was tasked with bugging Gilberto's phone to ensure he didn't make calls disrupting the North Valley War. Jorge agreed, planning to resume his post, but Miguel insisted he stay for dinner. Despite his critical task, Jorge couldn't refuse. As time ticked by, the DEA's raid began, but Jorge was stuck in the building. He disabled Miguel's men's radios, ensuring Flaco couldn't warn anyone. While Miguel grabbed wine, Jorge turned off his radio, claiming he preferred red wine. As Miguel left to get it, Jorge disabled the henchmen's radios. The DEA passed Flaco's post. Despite his alerts, the disabled radios kept the building unaware, but Gilberto heard the helicopter. Jorge pretended to check with Flaco, urging Miguel to flee. Miguel wanted to hide in a room. Javier landed on the roof. Daniel led troops from below. The teams converged, searching but finding no Miguel. Cali police, tipped off, arrived with the chief to assist, actually to help Miguel escape. Javier had to find Miguel fast before obstacles grew. Chris called their mole, but Jorge was right there. Chris separated Jorge from Miguel's men, probing further. Jorge insisted Miguel was in the building but didn't know where. The DEA kept searching. David, informed, confronted the chief playing ball, demanding he stop the DEA. After searching, the DEA made progress. Chris found a Cali ledger under a table, and Javier and Daniel noticed the bathroom had been remodeled. Javier decided to drill the wall. Miguel, hiding behind, trembled as the drill pierced his arm, but stayed silent. As Daniel broke through, the chief shouted, "Stop!" Representing Colombian law, he opposed them. Chris ignored him, drilling on, but Javier, fearing diplomatic fallout, halted. The chief seized Chris and Daniel's passports. They wanted to stay in track, but Javier ordered them back to Bogotá to report to Colombia's defense ministry. The raid failed miserably. Miguel, shaken, emerged, feeling he'd escaped death. Gilberto, seeing the news, called, urging calm, saying he'd negotiated a new surrender deal. "I'm not surrendering, Gilberto." With the raid failed, Jorge called Chris, knowing Miguel would hunt the mole. He begged Chris to get his family to the U.S., but Chris was powerless. Jorge, on his own, assembled a gun from parts, carrying it for the first time. Nearly caught, Miguel, paranoid, trusted no one, interrogating those present, demanding the mole's identity. Suspecting Flaco from last night's watch, David called Jorge, ordering him to find and bring Flaco. Jorge knew Miguel seeing Flaco would expose him. He went to Flaco's, warning of danger, taking him to a motel, instructing no contact, promising safety. Flaco, grateful, trusted Jorge. Jorge told Miguel he couldn't find Flaco but set cameras at his house. David grew suspicious, but Jorge claimed ignorance, blaming radio failure on DEA jamming. Possible. But it doesn't explain how they knew I was here. Miguel ordered David and Jorge to find Flaco for questioning. At Flaco's, finding nothing, David decided to wait. He sent Jorge to fetch assassin Navegante. At the meetup, Jorge, fearing Navegante was there to kill him, gripped his gun. Navegante appeared. "Where are you hiding him? Take me there." "Who?" "Palomari." Relieved, Jorge learned their mission was to find accountant Palomari. Since the DEA trailed Palomari to Gilberto, Miguel had Jorge hide him. Now, Navegante joined to silence him permanently. They arrived. Palomari was gone. David called, saying he caught Flaco, exposed by a family call. He ordered Jorge to the location. Knowing escape was slim, Jorge stayed calm, arriving to see Flaco beaten, hands tied. Miguel emerged. Flaco confessed everything. Miguel asked Jorge if it was true. Jorge called Flaco a liar, rushing him, slipping a pager into his jacket during the scuffle. As David moved to kill Jorge, the pager beeped. Jorge claimed it was DEA gear, proving Flaco the mole. With evidence clear, David had Flaco killed. Jorge dodged suspicion again, contacting Chris, urging a quick raid on Miguel before he was exposed. A man was led by police to a payphone, but it was silent. A bystander said it was broken, suggesting booth 5. The man asked, "You Colombian too?" "I'm from Cali." Sweating, he calmly picked up the phone. It was Humberto, Cali's money launderer, previously caught by Javier. He knew Cali's secrets but would only talk after seeing his wife. Though the Miguel raid failed, Javier got Humberto's coded ledger, which only Humberto could decipher. Javier struggled to find Humberto's wife for a Miami prison visit, then learned he'd been killed in jail. Only the ambassador, DEA, and Colombia's defense minister knew about Humberto and the ledger. Javier told the ambassador, who ordered him to stop meddling with Cali and turn over documents by 5 p.m. With half a day left, Javier saw General José, the only trustworthy Colombian official. Despite a prior reprimand, José agreed to help catch Miguel, keeping it secret from Colombia's government. Javier stayed in Bogotá. José led the operation. After Jorge and the DEA planned the raid, Miguel, nearly caught once, was on high alert. Capturing him required an elite team and luring him out for General José to ambush on the road. Jorge knew David still suspected him, watching his house. At home, Jorge gave his wife a gun, taught her to use it, and told her to shoot any stranger except the DEA. After eliminating Flaco, Miguel felt temporarily safe. Eavesdropping on Gilberto's prison talks, he summoned Pacho and Chepe to plan Cali's future. Stunned that Miguel dared bug Gilberto, they listened as he justified it as necessary and rejected Gilberto's surrender plan. To win them over, Miguel gave Chepe a New York production base and Pacho the Salazar family's hideout. Both reluctant to surrender, they sided with Miguel, abandoning Gilberto in prison. As talks ended, Jorge approached Miguel to lure him out for José's raid, but David realized Jorge was the true mole. "We've got news, prep the car." Chris, tipped by Jorge, told Javier in Bogotá that Colombia's defense minister was bought by Cali. Earlier, Javier had informed the minister of Miguel's location, preparing the raid. Miguel called Jorge, saying a Bogotá friend warned that the DEA was in Cali. Jorge suggested moving Miguel to a new hideout. Unsuspecting, Miguel agreed, unaware of Jorge and the police's trap. David, distrusting Jorge, followed Flaco's dying words to the DEA agent's location but found no link to Jorge. About to leave, they spotted a camera. Reviewing a week's footage, they saw the agents, confirming Flaco's tip. Further viewing revealed Jorge, Miguel's trusted ally. "You suspected the right guy." As Miguel packed, he told Jorge to wait downstairs. Jorge saw the ambushing police but was called inside by Miguel's men. Chris alerted Daniel, who noticed David at Jorge's house. Realizing the plan was exposed, Chris got Javier's approval to attack Miguel's hideout. Upstairs, Miguel told Jorge to sit. Before understanding, Jorge was beaten, tied to a chair, mouth gagged. "You bastard! Ungrateful traitor!" Furious, Miguel said he'd sent David to kill Jorge's family. Jorge, panicked, was helpless. Miguel's men reported police breaching. Miguel sent his family ahead, aiming to kill Jorge. He suffocated Jorge with a plastic bag. Gasping, Jorge hallucinated Flaco, whom he'd betrayed, his eyes closed. Jorge's wife, packing, heard the doorbell. She hid the kids, grabbed the gun, and approached nervously. "Open the door, DEA." Hearing it was the DEA, she opened it. Daniel warned of 2 threats outside, urging her to follow. In the living room, they heard knocking. Javier told her to stay with the kids. David and his man, unanswered, kicked the door in. Seeing Daniel, David fired. Daniel took cover, exchanging shots. Out of ammo, Daniel ran upstairs, found Jorge's wife's gun, and fired down. David fled in fear. Jorge, nearly suffocated, was saved by Chris, who killed Miguel's men. Miguel, not finishing Jorge, was dragged off by his henchmen. He fled through a tunnel to the parking lot, ignoring the fight. As he drove off, General Jose stepped out, capturing Cali's drug lord Miguel. The raid succeeded, saving Jorge and his family. But Javier got bad news. Cali didn't just bribe the defense minister but funded the president's campaign, controlling Colombia's elite. Javier told the U.S. ambassador, who admitted knowing but stayed silent for diplomatic ties. Javier realized catching Narcos couldn't dismantle Cali. The only chance was decoding Cali's ledger, detailing deals with the president. Only accountant Palomari could decipher it, but he was missing. In prison, Miguel, aware of Palomari's importance, used the warden's phone to order David to find and kill him. Javier arranged for Jorge's family to reach the U.S., then met Jorge, explaining the challenge. Knowing only toppling Cali would secure his family, Jorge, despite his wife's protests, agreed to help. The 4 flew from Bogotá to Cali. A woman took out a target, moving a pickup truck aside. Another car arrived, carrying Pacho. He led men to the Salazar house, where henchmen were dispatched. His target, the Salazar matriarch, cursed him, knowing escape was futile. Pacho shot her dead, then sat in a church, awaiting police, surrendering his gun. After Pacho, Chepe surrendered to Colombia's government. The 4 Cali bosses reunited in prison, Gilberto and Miguel reconciling, bribing officials top to bottom. They lived comfortably in jail, not what Javier wanted. With Jorge's help, after capturing Miguel, Javier persuaded him to return to Cali to find Palomari. Using Cali's wiretaps, they learned Palomari's wife had an affair with a co-worker. Javier tracked the lover, offering money for their whereabouts, but he claimed ignorance. As Javier left, the lover called Palomari's wife. Jorge traced the call. That night, Javier went to convince Palomari to go to the U.S. Jorge, watching below, was grabbed by Cali's assassin Navegante. When Javier asked if it was safe, Jorge, under threat, said to come out. As Navegante aimed at Palomari, Jorge drew his gun. Navegante, shocked, Jorge never carried, thought he wouldn't shoot. He was wrong. David, enraged that Palomari was taken, rushed to the airport but was killed by North Valley. Palomari reached the U.S., testifying Cali funded the president's campaign with $6 million. Colombia called it slander, and the U.S. dismissed it to preserve ties. Javier's 2 years seemed wasted. Unwilling to lose, he contacted a journalist to expose the truth. Colombia erupted in protests. The government, cornered, voided Cali's deal. The 4 bosses faced real prison. Chepe tried escaping but was killed, his body dumped. Pacho was murdered by North Valley. Gilberto and Miguel were extradited to the U.S. In May 2022, Gilberto died in prison from illness. Miguel remains in a U.S. jail. The two key figures in Cali's downfall, one resigned for leaking to the media, the other, protected by the U.S., vanished anonymously. This is the full story of Narcos. What did you think? On a scale of 10, how would you rate it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for following along. Goodbye and see you next time.
Nombre.